Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Ravoy. Hello, fathers. Are you intentionally creating your family's culture? We're all naturally influenced by the dominant culture around us. Unfortunately, modern culture is not family friendly, nor does it promote healthy living and behavior. If we, as fathers and parents, are not creating an intentional culture in our families, somebody else will. And we may find that the culture that ends up in our family is at odds with both us and what is healthy. Every day, there are men who lose their wives and children to the modern anti-family, anti-life culture. Today, I'm going to be talking with Reeves, a family coach, as we discuss how men can protect their families from this possibility. Welcome, Reeves.
Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on.
No, it's my pleasure. Could you perhaps introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and how you help families?
Oh, sure. So, my name is Reeves. I'm on Twitter, and the goal is to help families. Ironically, the way this podcast is set up uh, intentional living. So, set up family values, set up a mission statement. If you look at my Twitter bio, it's all about taking your family from chaos to order. Most people are running around this world that are being flip-flopped one direction, depending on what the media is telling them, depending on what their parents are telling them, and they don't have solid values that are guiding them through life, even basic family routines. So that's what we do. We set those things up so that people can go from a chaotic lifestyle to an orderly lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people I think that are having trouble where they say, "Oh man, raising kids is so hard," or "Being married is so hard."
Mm-hmm.
And some guys like us, we might go, "I don't know what you're talking about. This is pleasure and joy." But if you are well organized in the way that you're operating, life is so much easier. And if you're in chaos, everything will be hard.
Sure,
We
sure,
probably
sure.
noticed that at some point in our lives where we're getting ready for things in the morning, and if we have our stuff laid out the night before, if we're organized, get ready like that. I know a woman, she had 10 kids, small kids. I think the oldest was 12. So there's like literally every year having a kid. And she could get ready to go places and be there on time. Whereas other friends I know that have one or two kids, they couldn't seem to do it. And I asked her, I kind of knew, but I wanted to confirm what's the secret? And she says the secret is it's organized like a little army. She says everybody knows what they're supposed to do. There's no confusion. She says, I know I have a limited time in the morning, so I do what I can the night before. She organizes it all.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that it was no harder for her to have 10 kids than it was for three. Because she says you get to a point where once you have a system in place, adding more children doesn't really add more work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it was amazing to see those kids helping each other get ready, helping the younger ones.
Yeah,
And that's really underestimated by people today.
sure, sure. Actually, know several families that have 8 kids or so, and their house is like an airport when you go there. It's just it seems like chaos, but it's organized chaos because everybody has a purpose and a goal, and they know what they're doing. A lot of people that have just one kid too, they have a different perspective on life because raising one kid is completely different than raising multiple kids. And ironically, it gets easier in a sense because as your kids grow, they can help out and help to do things. I have 3 boys, and my oldest one is 10, and he's now more trustworthy, than he was when he was 2. So 2, it took my constant monitoring and caring for him to make sure that everything was okay. But now he can help his 6-year-old brother get ready while I'm doing something in the kitchen or doing something on the other side of the house. The 6-year-old doesn't have to depend on me in order to make that happen. Um, but I think maybe going back to something you said earlier, especially in regards to marriage, people who talk about raising kids and marriage being so difficult, a lot of them start off on the wrong foot to begin with. And so when you start off on the wrong foot, look out, because your marriage is going to be terrible, right? You you pick a woman because she's fun, or you pick a woman because she's aesthetically pleasing to you, or you picked a woman because you couldn't find a better one or whatever, and those are the
Or
reasons
it
that.
was just time. It was just time.
Yep, that's
And
right.
I will even add that for some of my Christian viewers, some people will be like, I just felt that like God was pushing me in this direction.
Yep.
And the reality is that's often an excuse for bad decision making later.
Yes.
God wants you to make logical and rational decisions about who to marry. He
Yep.
doesn't want you. He doesn't want you going based just off feelings.
Yep, yep. Well, and even marriage, some people have this perception like I have to marry the exact right person,
Hmm.
and that's like the kind of like the soulmate mentality. And so I think that's even getting off onto the first step, right? They don't get into marriage for the right reasons and the right motivations, you know. The girl's cool. She's one of the guys, right? She drinks beer with us. She watches football with us, right? I can talk to her about anything. She goes, whatever. Like those type of things are the shallowness that our society is entering into marriage with. And
What
of
and
course,
I think a lot of those expectations of marriage where you're basically I've had a lot of guys describe to me, what's your perfect woman? And they essentially describe a man with tits. And their expectation is to have this other human being that will fulfill all of their social needs. And they're not going to have to go out and make friends anymore because they've got their partner. They're not going to have to basically do anything. It's somehow going to complete them and fill this massive hole in their life that could have been filled by them fully growing up, finishing developing themselves, and also finding some male friends. I think for men, if you can't have a good male relationship with another man, if you can't have a guy in your life that you trust to have your back in like a life and death situation, how are you going to make a relationship with a woman who is so much different from how men operate?
right,
If you
correct.
can't do the one, you're going to be a terrible mess on the other. And most divorces, I think the most divorces start before the couple even meets. So they haven't
That's
even
right.
met yet, and the seeds for that divorce are being planted in the expectations that each partner has before they even get together.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Yep. So this is what I mean. People call it like this cycle where you have parents that get divorced, and that sets the kids up to get divorced, and the kids don't have the mom and the dad who are educating them on the values and the responsibility and the mission and the marriage, and they don't have that good example, and they're surrounded by people that are providing terrible examples, and so it just kind of ends up being the cycle where it's like, okay, well, my parents got divorced, my mom got remarried and she got divorced again, my dad got remarried and he got divorced again, everybody that I know is divorced, and so it's like factored into life now, like you know um so
Well,
kids end up.
part of it is I don't know if you've seen this where guys will put more effort into buying a used truck and like searching around for that
Yes.
truck and getting the right truck and making sure that they've checked all the reviews and doing their due diligence and background on the seller.
Yep.
And then when it comes to marriage, it's like, so what do you like about her? Yeah, she's hot and fun.
Yep.
And
Yep.
like you wouldn't just buy the first shiny truck you saw. The guy puts effort into it. Man, if he put half that much effort into picking a woman,
Yep.
he would do a much better job than what he's doing now.
Yep, yep. Yeah, that's spot on. And I mean, it goes even broader, right? Because I know that football gets railed on a lot. That men just know football statistics off the top of their head, but they can't tell you their wife's favorite restaurant to go to, or they can't tell you your wife's favorite movie. Like um,
How many
we
times have
actually.
you missed your anniversary versus missed the Super Bowl?
Right. Correct. Correct. Yeah, people put too much emphasis on the wrong things. Really, things that don't have don't have lasting value, right? I mean, even if you do remember who won the Super Bowl, 10 years ago, does it matter? It doesn't matter. Versus going through. I think though people use this excuse, which is uh, I need a hobby. I need time to myself, right? Like this is kind of like the mentality. It's like I work so hard. I just have to get away. I have to play golf. I have to, I need something to myself, and it completely removes just the family community, the aspect where it's like, well, no, you're not selfish anymore. You're living your life together. And there can be things that you do on your own for sure. You can have your own hobbies, but they can't be destructive to the family.
Yeah. And oftentimes, um, when you look to it too, most guys are looking for highly consumptive hobbies.
Hmm.
What they do is they trade money for the illusion that they have a hobby.
Yep.
It's not like they're out, building furniture from scratch, or, learning to
That's
hunt
right.
and fish, or something that's got some sort of production practical value.
Right. Right.
It's essentially glorified entertainment. Entertainment is not a hobby.
Yep.
They're different. I've had people, what's your hobby? Oh, I drink coffee. That's not really a hobby. It's a consumption.
Yeah.
If I asked you what your vices were, and I'm not against coffee drinking, but I asked you what your vices were, and you said, oh, I drink coffee. Okay, that might fit in.
Sure.
Hobby is supposed to make you a better man.
Yeah. Yep.
It's supposed to make you better at whatever it is that you have chosen as a man to pursue. So if
Hmm.
your hobby makes you a better husband, a better father, excellent. Makes you a better man, better friend to your other friends, great. But if it's just consuming resources, it's not a net positive to you or anyone else.
Yep. Yep. I know. I had put out a tweet, I think a couple days ago, that was, Netflix will never make you a better father.
Yep.
Yep. And
Yeah,
that's
I would even argue that we are far more susceptible to influence than most people will believe.
Mhm.
I'm a highly disagreeable person, but I recognize if I watch a certain program that it will influence my mood. If I listen to certain music, it influences my mood. The people that I'm around influence what I'm thinking. Now, I
Yep.
tend to be the one that influences them, but I get something back from that too. And if I spend time around people that influence me negatively, or entertainment that influences me negatively, I'm going to pick that up into my personal culture.
Yes.
When I was a kid, I used to say you can't take a dirty rag and a clean rag and scrumple them up and put them in your pocket and pull out two clean rags. You end up pulling
Right.
out two dirty rags.
Right.
It tends to
So
be that the most negative aspects rub off the easiest.
that's right. I know I feel the same way. I'm highly susceptible. So I have to be aware of this because it's I saw someone on Twitter had posted, what's the best font to use? And the font that got the most likes was a Georgia font. And I was like, I'll try it. I clicked on it. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then I'm thinking to myself, I like Georgia font now because it had the most likes on Twitter. What the heck is wrong with me, But it's a weakness that you have to be aware of. Like, okay, if I watch this movie, it will influence me in some way and in some form. And especially with media, one of the greatest bits of advice I received was, don't let something happen on the screen that you wouldn't let happen in your living room,
Yeah.
because it's the same thing. Your body's treating it as the same thing. And like, if you turn on this movie and there's a sex scene in it, well, would you let those two people do that in your living room while you and your wife are sitting on the couch? Probably not. Well, if you won't, then you shouldn't be watching it on TV anyways.
Yeah. Women watch 16 seasons of Special Victims Unit, and then they're like, all men are rapists.
That's right.
Well, yeah, because all the men that you've seen on TV for the last, 300 hours of TV programming you've been watching have
Yep.
been rapists. This isn't real life. It's
That's right.
programming for a reason. It's programming you to think a certain way.
Yes.
And whether or not you think there's a collective agenda behind this programming doesn't matter.
No.
What matters is the effect that it's having. The why, that's a totally different discussion. What effect is it having on us? And if it has that kind of effect on us as adults who are, fully mature and grown, and our personality is more or less developed the way it will be, although we have a lot of control over future personality development, still, what effect will it have on children?
That's right.
Especially
Yes.
prepubescent children, boys that haven't got that disagreeable testosterone boost that makes them want to, go their own way.
Yep.
And they're still very pliable when they're
Yep.
young.
That's
They'll
right.
kind of believe what they're told to believe. And it's very, very hard to give up the things that you were indoctrinated with as a youth.
That's right.
That's a good thing if we learned good things.
Right. Right.
But man, if we were exposed to 5,000 hours of Netflix between birth
Yep.
and 12 years old,
Yep.
that isn't going away easy.
No, 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 not at all. And my generation, that's where we are, because I'm just on the cusp of being a millennial. And the millennial generation, the consumption generation, that's where we're at, man. Parents are foregoing training their children for allowing Netflix and video games and social media gurus to train their kids. I mean, it is just appalling to see kids have free reign on their iPad and to be able to watch whatever YouTube videos they want and to be able to watch these guys that are playing video games for hours and hours and hours and listening to the conversations that they have when they talk to each other. And like, not only is it not age appropriate, but it's disgusting and it's wrong. And if their parents knew, which a lot of times they don't because they're not paying attention,
They don't want to know.
they wouldn't
They
be
don't
happy.
want to know.
No, they want to do their own thing. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
And
a lot of people complain about the boomers, and they're like, "Well, the society was going along good, and then the boomers came along and ruined everything." The boomers were the first generation where almost everyone had access to a television.
yep.
It's not just the post-war malaise that a lot of men were burned out from the war, and they found it very difficult to, the same guy that personally led an attack on an enemy machine gun nest now can't tell his wife no and his kids no.
Right.
It's not just that because he's completely exhausted. He's burned out from all of that. It's also the fact that they got thousands and thousands of hours of TV programming, and no human generation had ever had that much state programming before. All TV is state programming because you're licensed by the state to make it. So they get to decide what goes on or what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look back, people say, well, watch some wholesome movies from the 1950s. Go take a look at children's programming from the 1950s. It's almost all about conspicuous consumption and politely being incredibly selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And so you notice the boomers today, conspicuous consumption and being super selfish while still pretending to be nice.
Yeah. That's right.
They were trained to do that. Like, yeah, we can blame them for the decisions they made. That's natural. But they were trained to do that from infancy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the big reason that we're seeing a pushback on that now is there are a lot of people like you and me that just aren't letting our kids watch official programming.
Yep. That's right. It's so dangerous. It's so dangerous. I mean, the one of the most dangerous parts about it is that it's easy to do, right? And so for parents who are, and I mean, I think all these like are kind of interconnected. When you put the husband and wife are now in the workforce, right, and they're both working full-time jobs, and it's like, they don't have time to parent. They just want to let their kids. They want to do something mindless when they get home, right? And they want their kids to do something mindless. They don't have the energy or capacity to sit there and train their child and come up with some of the things that we're going to talk about in this conversation, because they're burnt out, right? Their whole life is spent slaving away to make the amount of money that they want to make, to have the things that they have, that they have to neglect their kids in order to survive, So whereas I have chosen, and some people that I know have chosen, to take a more slower lifestyle where I'm not burning myself out all day, every day. My wife is not burning herself out all day, every day, because kids take a lot of your energy, man. They take a lot of your energy and your time. And I notice when I raise my kids, if I take on one or two extra responsibilities, it becomes harder. And I become more short with my kids, and I become less willing to answer their questions, right? Because now I have decided to do too much with my time. Yeah, and the kids get the brunt of it. You know what I mean? Whatever activity I went to do, that's going to get 100% of my attention and my energy. But the kids get the brunt of it because, they're home and they have to deal with me.
Yeah, and if we look back, my great grandmother, she was one of 16. And I would ask her about what life was like when she was younger. She was, I think, born 1912, 1914, something like that. And so she was the second or third kid. So she got to see the whole process of the kids being raised. And she was the oldest girl, so she had a lot of responsibilities to look after younger siblings. And she said that her mother had more free time than she had. She only had one kid, and more
Mhm.
free time than my mom had with three sons. And she has said the way it works is, first of all, we didn't own anything we didn't need. We only had a few changes of clothes.
Mhm.
We had a radio because they were selling radios at their general store that they owned. So if you don't have one, why should the neighbors buy one? So they had a demo model, but they had a radio. That was their entertainment for, I think, 3 hours of programming a week was on the radio at the time. It was always music, and the rest of the time they spent doing practical things. Um, just one second. My son came in to ask a question. He's finishing up his. I think he's finished his daily school, so he was just coming in to ask a question. But yeah, she said we were so well organized. We had so little to do. They did manual laundry, manual everything,
Mhm.
and she still had more time. And
Yep.
the boys only went to school for 12 weeks a year. All the kids. That's the only time school was only open in the summer, because in the winter, this was Canada. You couldn't get to the school because you were snowed into your property. And your number one people you spent time with were your siblings and your cousins. And your
Yep.
entertainment was reading the Bible and knitting and playing games and
Mhm.
baseball and other stuff in the backyard, and riding horses and other stuff that you do in the country, and hunting and fishing and chopping wood. I asked her what her entertainment was, and the first like 10 things she said were chores. We'd call it a chore now. Oh, we'd go and we'd watch the chickens, and then we'd gather up the sheep or whatever. Like that was your
Sure.
entertainment? Yeah, that was
Sure.
fun when you're a kid and you know nothing else. You take a kid now that plays 8 hours of video games a day. You want to go outside for a walk? Nah, it's
Yep.
boring.
Yep. Yep. So there's a couple things that you mentioned here that are very interesting as far as the family dynamic goes. One of them is I remember listening to another podcast, and they were talking about like the parasympathetic mode
Mm.
and the sympathetic mode, and what happens when you get kids who are playing these video games all the time. Their adrenaline's going and they're in that sympathetic mode, right? And that has them on high alert all the time, high agitation. They have trouble digesting food. Like there's a lot of negative things that happen when you're in the sympathetic mode all the time. The Was it your great grandma you're saying, or your grandma?
Yeah, my great grandmother
Your
talking about when she was young.
Yeah, if you think about the activities that she listed, all those things keep you in the parasympathetic mode, right? Where you're able to now digest food, you're not alert, you're basically rest and digest, relax, have fun, be calm. You're not going to be highly agitated by people and questions. And, that which is the way that our lifestyle should be. Most of our life, like, I don't know, 99% of our life should be that parasympathetic mode. But when you introduce things like video games and things like the TV and things like a high stress job, right? Even things like social media that are constantly bling, 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 like those keep your body in that sympathetic state where it's on high alert all the time. And then you wonder why you can't go to sleep. And
I
you
don't know
wonder
why I'm
why.
so I don't know why I'm so stressed. I just did spend 4 hours murdering people on a video game.
That's
What if
right.
that has anything to do with it?
Yep.
Basically, every child right now under the age of 10 is murdered at least one person digitally.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And if you think about how sick that is, it's our ancestors were more physically violent than us on average. If you look at crime statistics and human behavior studies, but they were mostly responsively violent to a violent world,
Right.
and it had real consequences. And it was still far less violent than the virtual violence that people engage in today. And
Sure.
to a certain extent, your mind and body has a hard time differentiating
Yes.
between participating in violence voyeuristically and actually being in a violent situation. They hook up heart monitors to people, and it races like they're in actual combat. They play a combat game. They feel like they're in combat.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that is that you're not meant to be in combat for years on end. It burns out people's endocrinal systems. A lot of young people have problems with their adrenal glands because they're burned out from all the exciting things they're doing.
Yep. 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 I don't know if you've heard about this, but originally for the U.S. military, when they did target shooting, they would just do like circle targets. They wouldn't do silhouettes. And when they introduced silhouettes and even like realistic looking targets, when they first introduced those, the people had a hard time shooting them. They had a hard time shooting them because they had never done anything that looked similar to like shooting a person before. And so just like, shooting a target is completely different than shooting a face that's looking at you, and that has a different, your body has a different reaction to that. Yeah.
Well, I talk a lot about the trifunctional system, and it's basically the order that European society was divided into, where there was a very tiny group, 1% or less, that were psychologically suited to be the judges, the priests, the lawyer, the people that basically deal with truth and law and science. And then there was the warrior groups, which produced security for the nation. But most people were producers. And the way producers operate is that it's consistent effort over a long period of time in a safe and secure environment makes them
Okay.
happy. The warriors, they like periods of calm to recharge, and then they like extreme excitement. And those individuals, they actually deal pretty well with it. That's why you'll see people go to war, and one guy's got PTSD, and the other guy's like, "Yeah, that was no problem." It has to do with which of those phases they happen to be closer to, which to some degree is your ancestry. But if you're not from one of those groups that is kind of predisposed to deal with violence, it's very, very hard for them to get soldiers to behave as if they're in the warrior class when they're not. And
Yeah.
this is why they started this training, because they noticed there's some guy, they get these, hunter survival guys from the Ozarks, and they just come in and they're bing, bing, bing. They know how to operate weapons. Fighting's no big deal for them, because a lot of those Irish Scots, they were a high percentage of them coming from the warrior class. And they were actually, that's why they had to leave basically a unwinnable war in Europe. They left, they came to the Americas and continued a kind of warrior culture. But if you're not from that, it's completely destructive. And now we have children of all ages playing warrior, playing soldier. And it
Yep.
is, kids have nightmares about this stuff afterwards, just like they have PTSD from a real battle. And it's younger and younger. There was a time I remember when I was a kid, they just started coming out with first-person shooter games. I'm 43 almost. And it was like, oh, that's for if you're 16 and up. No kids can play this. This is not appropriate for children. And now parents don't really seem to discriminate on what games they let their kids play. They'll discriminate against sexual content usually, but violence seems to be fine. Everyone accepts it.
I grew up, my parents, they let me play all kinds of video games. And so I grew up with this, video game generation. I was a part of that, but also I did a lot of like playing war with my friends, where we were in the neighborhood, right? Where we would have just fake guns, and we would run around the neighborhood and play. And when I think back on those experiences, one was at least interactive, like when I was out in the neighborhood, like I was working with my buddies, because you would split up into teams. It'd be like these 5 guys on this team, these 5 guys on this team. You got to take this side of the neighborhood. We take this side of the neighborhood. And then at this time we're going to start, and so we would be jumping neighbors' fences, climbing on roofs, climbing in trees, and we'd be playing war, and we would all be working together, which was useful. I mean, it's a social event where you're working with another person to accomplish a goal. Another thing that is almost completely lost with video games, you can talk to each other, but you're almost completely disconnected from facial expression. And if you don't like the person, you can just never play with them again online, and it's cool. You can just live in your own world with people who love you and care about you, and you don't have to work things out with other people,
You're also really disconnected from consequences.
Yep.
When you're running around with your friends and climbing up on roofs and stuff, there's actual real danger involved.
Yes.
The way my friends and I used to do, we'd have bows and arrows and actually shoot at each other with homemade bows and arrows. Occasionally someone would get one stuck in a leg. Nobody ever got one in the eye, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And we really beat each other with sticks as if they were swords. We didn't do as much with guns. It was Canada, so it was more swords and shields and bows, more primitive warfare.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but there was real consequences. You could really twist an ankle. You could really fall off a tree, fall off a
Yep.
building.
Yep.
And what that meant is that you were practicing your risk management skills.
Yep.
Whereas when
Hmm.
you're playing a video game, it's, oh, I died, no problem. I got a new life, got a new life, got a new life. And we start
Respawn.
to,
Yep.
yeah, it modifies how we think about risk into a very negative way. It's extremely important for boys to play risky games. Like I differentiate with my kids between risk and danger.
Hmm. Hmm.
Risk is where you could get hurt, but there could be some valuable thing you get from this, fun
Right.
experience, a skill you learn. Okay. Danger is where you're going to get hurt. It's going to be bad, and you're not going to learn anything from this. This is just silly. Don't
Yeah. Yeah.
don't avoid the danger. Go for the risk, because
Hmm.
almost every game that a boy wants to play involves risk. My
Yep.
my youngest, they're jumping up. The 2-year-olds are jumping up and down on the bed. One of them says to the other, "Look, I'm going to risk," and he does an extra big jump, nearly fell off the bed, and they both laugh about it. But he has sometimes done that, fall off, fall on his head, roll around on the floor, get hurt. They scream about it. Now each time they're getting better at avoiding the negatives while maximizing taking advantage of the opportunity. That's why boys have to face risk. You don't face any real risk in a video game.
Right.
It's
I,
all it's all a simulation with no skin in the game.
yep. I had a tweet not too long ago that was video games don't create courage. Video games don't create courage, when I was in high school, I played a lot of paintball, and I live over here in Arizona. I live in the desert, and we rarely would go to an actual paintball field. We would really go just out into the desert where we could play, where the cops wouldn't be called on us. That was our main goal, was to not have the cops called on us. And
Added risk.
and yeah, and so, dude, I mean, it was like playing paintball out in the desert. Like, you really have skin in the game. Like, you might get cactus stuck into you. If you stick your head out, you might get shot in the head. And while you have a mask on, it can still be very painful. And so, and then again, you're working with people instead of talking with people over the headsets. So those things, man, I would much rather have my kids outside playing war with their buddies, playing Vikings with their buddies, or playing paintball, than sitting inside playing a video game. There's way more that comes socially developed from those things. I will say too, it's not even only the social, it's also the physical development that comes from the kids. I was reading an article not too long ago from a high school football coach, and he was saying that all the kids who come in now, they're not physically adapt, right? Like, when before, generations that were out playing, right, you would hop on the fence and you would balance and walk on the fence, and then you would fall, right? And so you would learn balance, and then you would also learn how to roll when you fall. You would be running away from your friends, and you would jump on something, and all those things develop you physically. And in some senses, they do develop courage, because, right, you climb up in the tree and you're like, I'm going to jump from here. And you look down and you're like, never mind, I'm not jumping from here. And you go down a little bit lower, and then you jump and you're like, okay, that was cool. And then the next time you're like, oh, I could do this. And then you jump, right? And you just developed courage by doing those things. And the kids who are coming in to play football now, they don't have that courage. They don't have those skills developed, because they were never outside climbing on roofs and climbing over fences and jumping out of trees, right? And I mean, barely even out riding their bikes, right? Because they're just in the virtual world. So not only social, but big gaps in physical development for these kids that aren't out doing physical things. Yeah.
Yeah, the U.S. military, I think it was 12% of 18-year-olds are physically qualified to join the military. And if you've seen one of these shows recently where they have like boot camp and they'll film it, almost
Yep.
every single kid is obese.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Yep.
talking like, I don't mean like they're, a little chubby like they could be a linebacker. No, they're like their knees touch while their feet are 2 feet apart level of obese. They can
Yep.
barely support their own weight.
Yep.
And this is a massive problem. There, young men today are either obese or incredibly skinny, or the correct weight, but it's all fat
Mm-hmm.
because they're not
Mm-hmm.
out doing stuff. My son begins his day with 25 push-ups and 25 kettlebell swings, and then does another 25 of each at the end of the day. And we're working up to he wants to get up to be able to do 100 of each over the
Mm-hmm.
course of a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I pick him up, and he's like, it's like he's solid. I can pick him up by one arm and swing. I'm pretty strong, so I can swing him around. And it's not. I'm not worried about his arm getting hurt. He if he bumps up with other kids his age, the other kids go flying, and I had to teach him to be careful. Because he's all hard and used to bumping around and doing stuff and wrestling
Mm-hmm.
with me, and I'll take him out, and my friends and I are boxing, and he'll come along, and we'll punch him a little bit, and so he's used to getting hit. He's used to enduring some physical pain and shrugging it off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because
Yep.
pain doesn't mean you're injured. There's a different pain when you're injured. You got to know the difference, and it's all a part of becoming a man. It's really hard to teach someone that when they're 18 years old. When they're
Right.
8 years old, that's pretty easy. When they're 18, there's this crucial window in there where they're either going to learn the skills that later develop into allowing them to be a man, or they're not. And it takes a lot more work to turn a broken boy into a man than it does to take a young boy and turn him into a man.
Yep. Yep. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Yep. Especially because the young boys are pliable and they're ready to be shaped. And I think it was between the ages of like the boys between the ages of like 2 and 6 are the most aggressive human beings on the planet.
Yeah.
That was something I think I heard from Jordan Peterson, which I've raised 3 boys, right? I'm in the process of raising 3 boys. And I'll tell you what, that is absolutely the truth. My kids every single day ask to fight me. My kids want to fight me every single day, especially my 6-year-old. Like he has the worst day ever if we can't wrestle on the trampoline. I mean, hands down, if you want the people who claim that there's no biological difference between men and women, like just raise a boy and raise a girl, and you'll know, hands down, there's way more biological differences. But I want to go back to some of what you're saying that connects to like raising your family intentionally or like intentionally parenting. You know, um, I think some of the problem here um, is that people don't have values that they're parenting their kids by, right? So once you don't have values that you're parenting your kids by, then you're just going to be sucked into whatever's happening at the moment, right? Whatever's going on throughout the time. So, like my family, one of our values is fitness, right? And we use that as a guiding post for making decisions. So this is one of the reasons my kids usually go on 1 or 2 walks every single day, because fitness is part of our values. I have a nice garage gym set up that with a squat rack and a rower, and I got a ton of stuff in there. And my kids are required to do pull-ups. My kids do pull-ups before school. They have to do a max set of pull-ups. After school, they have to do a max set of pull-ups. Well, the reason that they have to do that is because fitness is part of our value system that we live by. And so it doesn't matter if we are at home or we're traveling, right? Fitness is one of those guiding posts that leads us. It decides what meals we're going to eat and don't eat. It decides the restaurants we're going to go to and don't do. It decides the activities that we are going to do or don't do. So if you go, is this thing going to make us more fit? Yes. Okay, then there's a high probability that we will do it. If it's going to make us less fit, then we're not going to do it because it doesn't fit with that guiding value that our family is led by, right? So when parents aren't instilling these type of values in their kids, and they just let their kids go by what's popular, right? Why are the kids eating? It really comes down to not even necessarily popularity, but convenience, really.
Yes. Actually, that is the value. For the people
The
that
value
think they
is
don't have value, their value is whatever is less work for me, whatever is easier.
That's right. Why? That's why my kid is eating the Cheetos, right? And that's why he's playing the video games, because these things are convenient to do. It's much more difficult to cook up a really nice meal from scratch and get the kids out walking and get the kids out riding their bikes, like those things take more effort and more work, even though they have a better return for, I mean, the kid's entire life.
Yeah.
But when you don't have those values, you're just sucked in, man. You're just following what is happening and what's going on, you know? And so that those type of things are what allow you to live intentionally. So I think every family should have written values. You know what I mean? Um, mostly probably between like 4 and 5. If you get past 5 values, you know, at some point it's like, all right, the kids aren't going to remember this. You're not really going to remember this, you know? So you can sum up your values between, you know, like 3 and 5 values of what the family are going to live by. And then you can use those as guiding posts. And I don't have a hard time when my kids go, Dad, how come they're drinking soda but we're not? You know, we go to Costco. Hey, that kid's eating a churro. How come I don't get to eat a churro? Well, you know why you don't get to eat a churro. Is it going to make you more fit or less fit? It's going to make you less fit. You're going to be less healthy because you ate that. So we're not going to eat it, right? So I think that that is crucial to living an intentional life with your family, you know? So the ideal scenario would be that your parents pass values down to you. And then as you get older, you kind of take those values and kind of make them your own, right? Maybe you have 3 or 4 values that are similar to your parents. And then you kind of like maybe pick up 1 or 2 values that are your own. And then you marry somebody that has similar values, right? So again, going back to marriage in general, people are marrying each other because they're hot, because she's available, because she was the one who responded to me, right? She's the one who said yes.
Whatever's easy. Again, it goes back to the whatever's easy value.
Right. So if you had values and then you married someone with similar values, then you would almost like just intentionally be passing on these values because you already have had them established and your wife had them established and it's good to go. Like you're going to be passing them down to your kids. But that doesn't happen. So people have to go out of their way now to establish their own values or they'll just be grabbed by what's convenient today. Yep.
One of the things that I find really helps with establishing the values deep in our own psyche and in the psyche of our children is the story that we tell about ourselves and our family. When I say story, I don't mean like, you know, fictional, just make it up, but it's your family history, your family narrative. And I remember as a kid growing up, my dad telling me, you know, Revoys are strong people.
Mm-hmm.
He was always into powerlifting. He was a stonemason, so he was lifting 300-pound stones up on the walls and then cutting them to fit.
Yep.
And so he had to be strong to do that, and he had to be strong with all of the exercise he did. So, and then my grandfather, he never worked out in his life, but he was always doing like physically exertive hobbies. So like gardening, so he'd be carrying out like some gigantic tree out to his backyard and leveraging it into place and taking these huge rocks out of his garden. And so he was strong, like without going into a weight room, he was stronger than probably 90% of men in his 70s.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
yeah, and it was just like, and all the men in the family were big and strong. And it was just who we were. I just took it for granted that I was going to be strong too if I did what they did.
Yep.
And even I even went back to stories of relatives I never met because they died before I was born. And my grandfather would tell me the stories about his dad being a lumberjack and all his uncles being lumberjacks with him, and all of the crazy adventures that they had, and you know, ventures they had during the war and stuff like that. So they were. It was to me, I'm just going to be strong. That's what I'm going to do.
Yep.
And it was right into my psyche that I couldn't imagine myself not. And I went through a period of severe illness where I became very physically weak to the point where I couldn't even stand up because I was so sick. And it really hit my psyche hard that for the first time in my life, I wasn't stronger than almost everyone that I met. And it was like, I'm not me anymore. And I had to get back to being me. And so I had to fight to get my health back and to recover myself because I wasn't me. It doesn't, when I'm not fit, I don't feel like me. I don't feel right. And the ideal for our children is not, oh, I got to do these things. It's
correct.
I would feel weird if I didn't.
Yep.
You know, the family culture should be the natural one for them, the one that they feel attached to. And the
Mm-hmm.
stories that we put along with that make a big difference towards that. And sometimes those stories are one of the things that I don't know how it got into the family stories. It was mostly my great grandmother, old Scottish lady. She would she would say, "All of the Revoys have weak hearts." She had a voice like that, only with a Scottish accent. I'm like, don't we all live close to 100 years old? Yes, but then their heart stops and they die. So I'm always like, I got to eat healthy, to make sure my heart is strong, and I got to keep exercising. And we would joke with her about that, but it did have an effect on how I viewed. Health needs to be maintained.
Yep.
Okay, I will be strong, but will I live a long time? Will I be healthy when I'm old? That's going to depend on me maintaining it. And my grandparents on my mother's side were incredibly intelligent individuals with, 7, 8 languages and stuff like this. And so that side of the culture taught me that, we have a lot of intellectual potential. We can learn many languages. We can do this. We can do that. It just was normal in the family. Nobody in the family spoke one language. Everybody spoke, and they didn't necessarily go to a country to learn it. They would learn it on their own to a level of university level of proficiency
Mm-hmm.
for fun. They do it for fun. And so growing up, I just thought this was normal. Doesn't everybody speak multiple languages? And it was, when this is your family story, when this is how you view yourself in your family, then you start to want to live up to your ancestors. But
Mm-hmm.
most people today, they don't know who their ancestors are. They're ashamed to ask. They don't know who to ask. And so they have no history, no story. They're disconnected from everything.
Sure.
And that means then, if you start your family values, are you just like plucking them out of the air?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think even if we, say we're an orphan and we really don't know who our parents are, then our family story it starts here.
Right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And create
Yep.
a new story, build a
Yep.
new story, because that also is inspiring for children. We are
Yep.
going to create the thing we lost. I
Yep.
lost my parents and my ancestry. We're going to recreate it for our children in the future.
Yep. Yep.
But I think you have to have a compelling story to motivate, especially children. Adult men can be rationalized into things. You're not going to rationalize a child into it.
Mm-hmm.
You need the story behind it. And like you said, we're fit people. We're looking for what makes us fit. And you're getting your kids to identify with that, so
Yes.
that you don't have to tell them what they should do. They're going to look at the situation and go, well, the obvious answer is, and they're going to pick the right answer.
Yep. Yep.
Just instinctually.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's the benefit of having family values, is it eliminates a lot of gray, right? It eliminates a lot of gray because you're helping to divide your life into kind of these categories in which you can view them for making decisions. And I 100% agree with you. You might even know your family history, and you may not like it. You may not like it. Like you might come from an overweight, lazy family, and you're not just going to go, oh, well, that's us, right? My parents were whatever, and they were overweight. We're Samoan, and so we're overweight people, right? No, you're going to say, no, we're changing this today. One of our family values, because of our ancestors weren't this, we are going to be this. And when people look back, they're going to see us as fit people, right? They're going to see us as people of faith. They're going to see us as people of family. Whatever it is that you decide you're going to have your family values be. I think there's so much power in saying, you don't even have to knock other people and their decisions. You can just say, our family doesn't do that. That goes against one of our family values. Well, why don't you watch this movie? Well, that's not part of our family values. We value these things because of this, so we're not going to watch that, or we're not going to go do that activity, right? So I think that it's great if you can inherit it, and that's what you're talking about. Like, you inherited some good family values, but if you didn't, then you're right. They have to start with you. And if you're single right now, one of your goals should be to establish your own personal values as quickly as possible that you want to pass down to your kids, find a woman that has those similar values, make some babies, and pass them down.
Absolutely. There's a scripture early on in the Bible. I think it's in the end of Exodus, where Aaron, that's Moses' brothers, for those who don't know much about the Bible, he says, this is after the death of Moses. He said, okay, so you have the choice. You can go, do what the people around here are doing and adopt their culture, or
Yep.
you can stick with our culture and worship our God. This is the choice I'm giving you. But as for me and my family,
Right.
we're going to worship God and stick with our culture.
Right. Yep.
And it's incredibly inspiring, because it shows that it is up to fathers, it is up to families to decide what culture you're going to follow. What are you going to do? What is it going to be like, your culture? And it's interesting that when you know who you are, which is really what your values are, your
Yep.
values are who you are. When you know what your values are, you tend to attract people with the same set of values, or compatible values.
Yep.
And you push away people with
Dissimilar
incompatible values.
Yep.
And for example, in my group that I'm forming here in Portugal of men that are, as they join, one of the things I tell them is, this is a group where we don't tolerate being physically unfit.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be incredibly fit. You don't have to be like an athlete, but
Right.
you can't be fat, and you got to be able to keep up with us when we go for runs and walks and box in the park and do stuff. If you can't keep up with us, you're going to figure it out as you join us on our physical. We get together 3 times a week, the men, to work out. You're
Yep.
going to figure it out, and you're going to join. And we're creating that culture in the tribe. The family culture is important. I'm starting now to branch into tribe culture. What is the culture of our tribe? Because I realize that my children are going to grow up and they're going to see who I associate with. And they're going to see, do I tolerate men with contrary values to my own?
Yep.
Do I tolerate them in my, we should be able to engage people with different values civilly.
Yep.
But as far as bringing them into our home and eating meals with them and being friends with them and relying on them, and maybe even letting our kids be taken care of by them once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
these have to be people who won't undermine our values, and in fact will reinforce them.
Right.
When my kid sees, oh, he's fit. I'm all surrounded by fit men and their fit wives. He now thinks it's abnormal to not be fit. There's something wrong with you, to the point where when he sees someone that's obese, he says to me, I don't think that person loves themselves. They're not taking care of their health.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And yet we are in a minority. Fit men are a minority. We're a very small minority. Like I said, if 12% of young 18-year-olds are fit enough to get into the military, how many 40-year-old men are fit? Very few.
Yep.
But
most men can't do one pull-up.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude. So what you're saying, though, I love what you're saying about the tribe culture, because my mission is to make the world beautiful by making families beautiful. And I think that's what happens is when you solidify your values and your culture, right? Then your family can then become beautiful. And then when that happens, you will find people that have similar cultures, and you essentially make this tribe, right? This is one of the most powerful things I think about the local church community for, people who are Catholic or whatever, just a church in general. Like, when you eliminate the church altogether, there's not very many ways where people gather together and meet, like sometimes it's the bar, and now you're connecting and meeting at the bar culture, right? So I think this is one of the most powerful parts of Christian community, is that these are all people with similar values, and they're helping each other and they're building each other up. And when your kids walk around, who do they see? They see people of similar values, So this is one of the problems with the U.S. right now, is the values are so split from each other, and we are willing to elect people who don't have our values, right?
Not only don't have our values, but literally hate us and want to exterminate us.
Yep.
They literally hate our values and everyone that holds them.
Yep. And then that it goes also to, we will work for companies that don't have our values. Right?
And
And so,
buy their garbage.
right, that's right. So once you just lose those values and it goes to convenience, I mean, you see where the world goes to. It goes to hell in a handbasket, and it's going pretty quickly. So we need the families to step up. We need the men to step up, to create their values, to shape their families, to stop worrying about football, to stop worrying about the UFC, and worry about your own kids. Man, dang it, they're the next generation. No one cares. Your kids aren't going to care who won the UFC last year, right? For the lightweight division. Who did that? It doesn't matter. But your kid's going to be missing you when you're gone watching the UFC, right? So, I mean, uh, finding your values ASAP is important. And that is what's going to change our culture. So many people want to vote the right person in the office. And it's just it's just obviously, we want to be careful about who we vote for. But you need to be more mindful about how you raise your own kids than who you're voting for. Yep.
Absolutely.
I had a tweet not too long ago that was family culture shaped by the kitchen table, not the voting booth.
Absolutely.
And I
And a lot of men are now, usually men without a wife, without children, they'll talk about how, well, we have to change this and that and the other thing before we can change our families. If your plan of action relies on everyone else in the world cooperating with you, you're guaranteed to fail.
Yep. Yep.
Assume that the majority doesn't like what you're probably trying to do, because most people's value is what's easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when you walk around, if you're a man and you're fit and you walk around, people who are picking the easy way out, some of them will still appreciate that you've put that effort in.
Yep.
And some of them will be jealous, and some of them will be angry, and some of them will say, we're all in a sinking ship together, and how dare you learn to swim?
Yep.
They will be upset that someone else is making good choices, and we shouldn't care about that. That's not
Right.
our problem. We
Mm-hmm.
need to make our good choices at the personal level, at the family level, at the tribe level. Anything beyond that, we have no control over.
Yeah. Yep.
We don't have much control over who's in our polity. We can't even control who immigrates to our country with perhaps completely opposite values. We have no control over that. What we have control over is our own actions and who we tolerate to be in our vicinity, our
Mm-hmm.
immediate vicinity. And
Yep.
so exercise your agency in the areas you have control over, and your life will change dramatically. It's usually the people that are at the highest levels of agency, they worry a lot less about what's happening at the national global level, because they've got their own life situated in such a way that they're hard to touch. It's hard for the powers that be to actually move them because they're on a solid foundation. The
Mm-hmm.
people who rely on some big daddy government and big mummy government to change their nappies and feed them, those people, of course, they're concerned about who's in charge of government,
Yep.
because that will decide their fate, because they don't decide their fate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I think there's something that's important too. Like, our society has really valued education to the ends of having a career and doing something. But there's something that really stuck with me. Plato, he basically said that the end of education, the goal is to orient a person towards values, loves, priorities, habits of discipline, virtues of character, right? Like, that is the goal of what the education should be, like, to live a good life, to live out truth, goodness, reality, beauty, like, to embrace those things. And we have completely lost that as far as it goes to educating our kids, where we have said, all right, well, we're going to teach our kids about math, and that's more important than our kids understanding and knowing and living out values and priorities and habits and disciplines and character, you know? Um, and we've said, okay, well, it's really important for our kids to know sex education, right? So we're going to teach them that, but we're not going to be teaching values and ethics and discipline, right? And so what
Yeah, they
happens?
know all about how to have sex. They have no idea about how to have a relationship.
That's right. Yep. Yep. And so, what's going to happen to the world culture when that is what the education is? I mean, I'm educating my child when I pass down the skill of discipline. I'm educating my child when I pass down habits that are important for him to live by, right? I'm educating my child when I'm passing down the family values. So I really think that when you reorient your perception on what it means to educate your children, that doesn't mean that you neglect history or neglect math, but you have to have them in the right priority. You know what I mean?
And you have to cast them in the right light too.
That's right.
Why is it that it's important for your child to learn how to make money?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct.
Money is not the end objective.
Right.
Now, every very wealthy family knows this. They teach their children, the very, very wealthy families, they often understand this passing on of family culture at a much higher level than ordinary people.
Mm-hmm.
And they understand that money is fuel for the things you want to accomplish.
Yep.
And they teach the children how to make money within the understanding that it is for your specific life goals, whatever those happen to be, which,
Yep.
the elites don't necessarily line up with what we consider moral.
Sure.
But that's what we should be teaching our kids. Why is it that you need to learn about history? Because history is how we got where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
It is what formed the cultures that we live in now. And it's extremely important to understand the world we're in so that you can operate effectively in that world. Therefore, you need to learn history.
Yep.
My son was learning math today, and he was like a little distracted. And I said, you need to pay attention to this because this is like, you're learning your advanced it's adding larger numbers is what it was. I said, you need to be able to add your millions together as a joke to him. And because he's always thinking about how to start a business.
Yep.
And he's only 8 years old, but he's always thinking about that. As you need to be good at math so that you can understand how to add your money together and know what to charge your clients and everything. And I immediately saw him increase his effort that he was putting in significantly because there's a story then behind and a reason to do these things that's in line with it's a chain reaction. He knows why he's doing that. A lot of, one of the synonyms for education that's very old and isn't used now is called formation.
Okay.
And it might remind you of the scripture where it talks about God forming us like clay on a potter's wheel.
Mm-hmm.
When you're taking care of children, you're forming them like clay, and different clay can be formed in different ways. And so there is, of course, some genetic components to your children. My kids are hyper disagreeable. They will not accept being told what to do. You have to invite them to do something and then give them a good explanation. And then, though, once they're on it, you can't get them to stop. So,
right.
You have to work with their genetic predisposition. Both their mother and I are like that. So they have to work with their genetic predisposition in order to be successful with them. But you also have to understand that you're doing a lot of that forming. Where they take their potential to a large extent depends on how they're raised. And I've seen kids that were poorly raised. They move out from home 18, 19, 20. And it takes them 10 to 15 years to get their life on track.
Yep.
And they'll tell me, I'm 35, but I'm only where I should have been at 20. Because it's taken me 15 years to heal from the hell of a childhood that I had.
Yep.
Now, I do think with the right help, men can heal faster. But most men have no access to help.
Yep.
And it can take that long. And now you've lost 15 years of your life. We don't want our kids to go through that. If you think about it, your great-great-grandfather was probably more of a man at 18 than we'll ever be. And our great-great-great-grandmother was probably more of a woman at 16 than most women today are going to be.
Yep, that's right.
Because of the way they were raised.
Yes. Yep. The advantage that you give your kids by staying married to your wife and passing down family values, it is astronomical, the advantage they will have above other kids. Even simply just knowing why they're doing what they're doing, right? Like even having a reason behind why am I functioning in this world? Like that's huge. People have a hard time waking up in the morning to accomplish something because they don't know why they're doing it.
Yep.
Right? They set these New Year's resolution goals, and they don't know why. They don't know why. And so the younger you can pass down all these whys, which is similar to, the values, if you can pass down all these whys to your kids, man, you give them a huge advantage in society, because they're not wondering, trying to figure out, why am I doing this? Why am I going to college? Right? Why am I tithing my money to the church? Why am I doing this and that? I mean, if my kids aren't standing on my shoulders, I've failed.
Absolutely. I've said this before that despite all of my father's flaws and imperfections, he raised a son that turned out better than him. And despite all of my flaws and imperfections, I'm going to raise a son that turns out better than me. My sons will turn out better than me.
That's right.
And that should be our ideal. And this is not to put down the past generations.
Correct.
Yes, they had their flaws, but our objective is to raise up our families. We're no longer at a point for most of us. Most men are not going to be able to have a direct effect on global culture, on their nation's culture. That's probably too far a reach for the vast majority of men. But in aggregate, by raising our children right, by creating that intentional family culture, we in aggregate have a much larger effect than any one individual is going to have on how nations run. And a lot of men forget their aggregate potential, the potential of them and all the other men following a path. I mean, we fell off the wagon of civilization after the Second World War because the majority of men checked out.
Mm-hmm.
They were exhausted from fighting that war, and they just checked out. They completely checked out. And we see the result of that.
Mm-hmm.
If enough men check back in, we're going to be the ones that are having the kids. We're going to be the ones influencing the future. The truly broken people who aren't interested in taking the help that's available to get better, they're not having many kids.
Mm-hmm.
And give that long enough. There was some great, this was in Japan, there's some great Japanese statistics that yes, their population is shrinking, but families are either having no children or 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
And they said the number of families with 4 and 5 children has never been higher since the Second World War. Because that's when they also had a similar problem to us, because they were exhausted from the war too. So what's happening is those that want to have kids are having a lot of them, raising them well. And a lot of them are moving out of the big cities, into the countryside, into the smaller towns for a quieter life, for less stimulation. And they're, taking their kids back to, if I live in the countryside, I spend half as much, I can spend more time with my kids. I'm going to work less. You can't raise 6 kids working 80 hours a week like your average Japanese man. And they're healing their culture in this way. And yeah, they'll have a population dip until everybody that's in the country has been raised with 5 or 6 brothers and sisters, and this is normal, and their population will recover again. I think we're going to do the same thing in the West. It's going to be complicated because we have such a fractured culture right now, unlike countries like Japan. But the potential for us in our families and our tribes to be beacons of hope amidst the chaos is enormous.
Mm-hmm.
The advantage that we will have, where I live here in Portugal, there's a lot of gypsies, and gypsies on average are people with very low conscientiousness and low IQs. And so they don't have a potential to go into certain fields on average. There's some really smart ones as well, but on average, they don't have the same potential, but they stick together like glue.
Mm.
They back each other. They live in tribal systems, and they back each other. And they always have, if you're a gypsy and you need help, you got it. The other gypsies will have your back from your tribe. They might fight you from another tribe, but your tribe has your back. That gives them an advantage, a huge advantage over the natives, over the Portuguese that aren't part of their groups. That unity, that tribal structure is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Your parents die, your dad dies, your mom dies, whatever. You got cousins and you'll live with. You got aunts and uncles you'll live with. You got family that will take care of you. Someone has always got your back. We need to recreate that. And I have a lot of people tell me, you can't artificially create a community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Every community in history started off artificially. The Roman Empire started off with Remus and Romulus, and several dozen outcasts from the neighboring tribes. There wasn't a single woman in their community. They didn't have a woman in their community until there were several thousand of them. And they went and they sacked a nearby city for women. You know, you can create an intentional community the way you can create an intentional family, the way you can live
Right.
intentionally as a man.
Yep.
And it really starts with that living intentionally as a man. When you get married, making sure that your wife is on board with that living intentionally. Ideally, she'll be on board before you get
Yes.
married. Making sure she's on board with that, having kids that are on board with that, surrounding yourself with other men that share your values.
Hmm.
There is no other way to create a community.
Nope. Mm-mm. Nope. It's
This
not.
intentionality is the only way to do it.
Yep. 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 And unfortunately, there is no way to accidentally do it,
Yeah.
which is why its intentionality has to be there. Yep. And the society is not going to push you in that direction either, right? Our society is not pushing you to. You have to, like, either if you didn't grow up in it, you have to stumble upon it, or you have to get some type of epiphany somehow, some way that you decide, that's it, I'm changing this. Maybe you have to hit rock bottom. That's what it is that makes you decide that you're going to live intentionally. um, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I didn't know that about Japan. That's actually some pretty cool information. I know that people don't talk about it, but America is in big trouble in that regard. Because even when China had their one child policy, the US was producing less than one child per couple. We didn't even have a government enforced one child policy, and we were still producing less than one child per person.
Per
And
woman usually is how they
I
measure it.
Oh yeah, less than one child. Yeah, we're able to reproduce the population, and I always laugh at the LGBT movement. Because they're like, they basically said, well, the religious people, they're gonna die out, right? They're gonna be you're gonna be obsolete. Your morals and your beliefs are gonna be gone. And I'm like, we're the ones that are reproducing, man. You're not. You guys aren't the ones that are out here reproducing and bringing out a whole bunch of kids.
Well,
Nope.
this is why they're coming after the children now. They can't
Yeah.
make their own children. Well, they could, but the way that they live isn't compatible with making their own children. And even if
Yes.
they could, we know this from studies that have been done, that children raised in those kind of environments, those extremely sexually liberal environments, even if they're not, even if it's a man and a woman, but that's these extremely sexually liberal environments, they have very few children. So they have
Yep.
children, but they can't have grandchildren,
Yep.
or
Yep.
they don't end up having grandchildren. And
Yep.
so it is a genetic dead end. And this, I mean, we talk about the great sorting that's going on right now between humans. And the reason that our position is so hated is because, think of it, you have these groups of men who just naturally are going together because we see, yeah, that's my brother. I can tell that's my brother. He's like me.
Yep.
You belong on my team. Let's get
Yep.
together. Let's live closer. Let's have our kids hang out. Let's have our kids marry each other.
Yep. That's right.
This is the one group people growing into their tribes. And then you have the masses of rootless, cosmopolitan, disconnected, hyper individualistics,
Yes.
radical individualists. We have a massive advantage over them. And it's not just because we're generally mentally healthier, it's also because we work together. We start to cooperate. Now,
Hmm.
they've been cooperating for a while. That's why they've been so effective at undermining the family and church and Western civilization in general. But they've gotten to a point where they're so radical, they even hate each other. They
Yes.
hate us a little more, but they hate each
Yep.
other too. And their level of cooperation is dropping. Well, our level of cooperation will just go up from here.
That's
And
right.
so we represent an actual existential threat to them because we can outcompete them
Yep.
in every sphere of life.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
they will treat us like we are an existential threat, like we are a life and death threat. That's why they'll talk about the things we say are like violence to them because they see
Hmm.
us out competing them in the near term.
That's right.
We can't
Yep.
let that stop us. We have to be aware that that's happening, but we
Yep.
can't let that stop us. And part of our family culture has to prepare our children for being different than the norm. That
Yes.
was one of the biggest things on both my father and my mother's side of the family, is because in many ways, like on my dad's side, it was highly charismatic, physically fit, good-looking people that were usually leaders in whatever they did, and were also incredibly skilled at violence. And so they always stood out. They were always different, and they ended up having really adventurous and interesting lives. And on my mother's side, it was highly intelligent, intellectual, but also very adventurous, like world globe-trotting people uh, who were, again, very different. And so I was taught right from infancy that you come from people that stand outside the norm.
Yeah.
You too
Yep.
will stand outside the norm, and you better get comfortable with it because that's who we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it,
Yep.
it was difficult, of course, to be a child and go to school. I went to kindergarten, and other kids couldn't understand what I was saying because my vocabulary was so rich that I was using half the words I was using, they didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was mixing some German in as well because I had a lot of German relatives constantly speaking German. They felt more comfortable speaking German than English a lot of times. So I was mixing it up, and I remember it took about 2 or 3 years till I could figure out how to communicate with my peers in a way that they understood. And it is a bit isolating, but I got comfortable being different than the norm. And whenever I'd come across another child or even an adult that thought like me, we immediately would recognize each other. And now with the internet, I'm able to find tons of men and
Yep.
women that are on my wavelength. And
Yep.
so we are pulling ourselves together. And I tell the guys that what we're doing is we're forming a new aristocracy.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize to what extent the existing aristocracies planned their position. Up until prior to the First World War, when aristocracies around the world started to become delegitimized, they planned very carefully to get where they were, to maintain their power, to maintain their separation from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And what it means is to recognize that your family has history and culture, and that you are allied with other families, and you're going to cooperate with them.
Yep.
We don't have to do this in a "I'm better than you" sort of way. It's
Mm-hmm.
more of a "I'm different," and
Right.
this is what works for me and my people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think that especially the language of being different, like I have this perception of I'm creating a beautiful family to beautify the world, but we're going to look different than an ugly world. We live in an ugly world right now, and by God's grace, we will look different than them. You know what I mean? Like if our goal is to pursue beauty, then absolutely we're going to look different. And you just have to kind of understand that. And it's better for your kids if you can pass that down to them and give them a heads up that look, we live in an ugly world. We're not embracing this ugly world. In fact, we're living in contrast to this world and we're trying to make it better.
Absolutely. And a big part of the reason the world is so ugly is because one of their primary values is do what's easy and conform.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
can't, they can't all conform to beauty.
Right. Correct.
Many of them could, but they can't all.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way they can conform is to drop down to the lowest common denominator and be all the same.
Mm-hmm.
That's their only way they can do that. And that plays into human beings will try to accomplish what they want to accomplish in the least effort possible.
Right.
If you
Correct.
can status signal by being lazy, you'll status signal by being lazy.
Yep.
But within our groups, within people who think like us, our status symbol, and status just means which group you belong to, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It's not a hierarchy necessarily. It's what group you belong to. Our status signal is physically fit, attractive, healthy, happy families. That's our status symbol.
Mm-hmm.
More, guy comes along, says, I got 12 kids. Like, wow, that's amazing. Guy comes along, yeah, I just did my first 3-plate bench press. Like, wow, that's impressive.
Yes.
If that impresses us, we know we're probably in that group. We're a brother to that guy somehow.
That's right. That's correct. Yep.
And that's how we're going to identify our tribe. And absolutely, men and women out there who are feeling isolated because you are different, because you want different things than what your neighbors and maybe the rest of your family wants. Go look for those people that want what you want. Associate with those people, even if you have to do it online for now. For a lot of young people, that's the only way they can do it.
Yep.
Associate with those people, absorb that culture, let that be your influence rather than Netflix and the propaganda that we get from a very ugly world. Let that beauty and that search for truth, which is truth is the ultimate beauty. Let that be your guide, and let yourself intentionally develop a life and a family and a tribe that follows those rules. Thank you so much, Reeves, for joining me today. It's been fantastic.
Dude, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
This is great. Have a good day, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.